Hey, Julie. Thanks for joining. Hi, Carlo. Hey, Joanne. Thanks for joining. Hey, Rosetta. Hi, Julie. Well, we're all over the country and
The continent.
America. Yeah.
Continent.
Yes.
Julie's from Scotland.
Yes, yes. Cool. So I'm sure more folks will be rolling in, but we can get started. So I just want to welcome everyone and thank you so much for joining us tonight. So my name's Annie. I'm the program director and artist in residence with Sicily Artist Retreats. Sicily Artist Retreats is an art school based in Marsala, Sicily, and we offer workshops in painting, drawing, and sculpture, primarily through figurative work and plein air. And we're so excited to have Marshall join us this spring. But let me introduce all of our guests that we have here today. So we also have Carlo Massimo. Carlo is a journalist, translator of poetry, linguist, and Carlo will be co-hosting this event with us tonight. I'm sure most of you know Marshall Jones, but just to give Marshall like a little introduction, Marshall Jones is a painter and draftsperson based in New York, working out of New York. He's the host of the Art Grind podcast. Highly recommend. Go listen to that. An instructor at the Art Students League, the New York Academy of Art, Salmagundi Club. Marshall's everywhere. Marshall's great. And like I said, he'll be joining us this spring in Sicily, and he'll be teaching indirect figure painting in both oils and acrylics. And what we're going to be uh, seeing tonight is some of his indirect oil and acrylic painting work, like the way he starts painting, primarily from the figure. And then we'll get a chance to see some of his newer work that he was just working on in residency. So I'm really excited to get into that. So um, I'll hand this over to Marshall in a second, but I just want to encourage our audience to please ask questions throughout. We will have time at the end for Q&A, but if you have a question about particular painting, if Marshall said something that you just kind of want to clarify or want to linger on a painting a little longer, please ask questions and chat in the chat. Um, so if there are any questions, just let me know. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat, and I'll ask your questions throughout. Yeah. So Marshall, you could take it away. And thank you for doing this.
All right. Well, thank you, Annie. Nice introduction.
Mhm.
Thanks everybody for joining. So I'll start us off talking a little bit about the process we'll be using on the retreat, and then move into how I use it in my everyday studio work as well. So I'll share the screen, and these will be images of my work in various different ways. I thought I'd start here with a painting I did around the around COVID-19. It was my friend, a New York art model, Betty. She's famous here. She models at all the schools, and there's just a bunch of paintings of her. But this was sort of during the height of the pandemic when everything was locked down. She and I walked around and did some photos, and my idea was to sort of see how we're going to emerge from the pandemic, sort of a painting about waking up. And there was historically, I heard about these people who would shoot like peas, would spit peas into people's windows to wake them up, I think primarily in England. So I had her kind of pose as someone shooting peas through a straw, and it has a lot of art history references with people blowing bubbles and things like that. There's like a really great Chardin painting at the Met, and then Manet did a couple of paintings in that regard, sort of like I think the idea was the bubble pops, and it's sort of like how when you see a skull in a still life or something like that, has that idea of memento mori or whatever. So this will be the process we'll largely be using on the residency. So this was a indirect process, which means you're arriving at the colors indirectly. You aren't really color matching anything on the palette to the painting. Say like, you're not grabbing ochre and orange or whatever and kind of mixing up a color and putting down a paint stroke. You're layering up through a series of many layers. This painting was probably, I don't know, 10 or 15 layers to get all of the detail that I ended up getting. But I'll start at the beginning here. So this is just the sketch. I start all my paintings with generally like a pencil sketch. If it's a quicker painting, it'll be with paint, more alla prima method. But this was just sort of like a little graphite sketch, trying to get all the placement of things correct, shadow shapes, all that stuff. And we talk a lot about placement and all that stuff, gesture, proportion in the classroom a lot. The only difference is this, I'm not really focusing on value in my drawing on this. I'm literally just trying to outline everything, and hopefully it's in a pretty good spot before I start painting it. And then I would have refined it a little bit more, still no value or anything. Actually looks kind of crude, a lot of straight lines, a lot of like searching lines. You could see all these little marks. Looks like my finger was all over this thing. But moving on from there, I start a wash of terre verte. So that's a green color, and Van Dyke brown. So the Van Dyke brown is transparent enough, and the terre verte is extremely transparent. So you can already see that you can see right through these layers here. And just sort of mapping out the lights and darks with a thought for the future. And I guess that's kind of one of the keys of indirect painting is you're always wanting to think about where you're headed, almost like a chess player, like 10 layers from here, what do I want to show? What of this is of value? And I chose a lot of shapes around the eyes and sort of around the neck to try to have some of that green and brown show through at the end of the painting. Kind of keying off like a lot of Baroque paintings and stuff where they were really focused on how much of the ground could you show, like Caravaggio, Rembrandt, Rubens, like how much color could you get out of a glaze and how much could you ultimately show at the end. So moving on from there, this is what you would call the closed portion, the closed grisaille. So all that washy stuff is still here, but you'll notice a difference in the face is I'm mixing the terre verte with white to actually kind of sculpt in opacity. So it's no longer just a series of washes. I'm using a little bit of opaque paint to modulate values and sculpt a little more detailed in the places where I want the paint to be thick. And again, kind of keying off what Rembrandt would do, really thick paint on the noses or whatever, and real thin everywhere else. I think a common joke for Rembrandt is you always know if it's a Rembrandt if you can pick the painting up by the nose, because it's so much built up paint. So moving on from there, still a lot of opacity that I'm happy with, a lot of that transparency, tons of it still showing up, giving me some options. And this is how I treat a figure like we'll be painting in Sicily or anything. Some of the stuff I'll show you a little later on, a little more of my studio work is much different than figurative work generally, but it's like still the same exact process that goes on. And then this would have just been a second layer of grisaille. It looks like in here I started to put a little bit of red in, just in that opaque paint, for whatever reason. You wouldn't probably wouldn't have seen a lot of that in art history, just though getting those warm spots. But I don't know, for some reason I felt like it was a pretty good idea. So the hand gets sculpted a little bit more, the cheeks, the eyes. But if we look closely, sorry, it's a little pixelated. We still have a lot of transparent moments throughout the painting. We're seeing down to the original ground, which looks even more transparent now in relationship to the opacity. And the reason I chose green on this was to kind of complement the skin tone. Maybe thinking about it a little bit like an undertone of green with a primary kind of orangey pink skin tone, which would be complements as well. But I always experiment with what colors I use for the grisailles I'm doing. Sometimes I do really super chromatic colors. Sometimes I'll go a little more traditional. Terre verte's fun like this. So it all depends on how I'm feeling. I don't really know if there's a right or wrong in a way to approach that. And that's a little more focused on the face itself. We can see how the eye, still a lot of transparency, is a little bit of a good bit of opacity. You could see that build up in paint even before I have to choose a color. I'm already kind of attempting to create some sort of texture. Um, and then from there, I would wash it with one color. So they call that like a couch glaze, just sort of something. It takes 30 minutes or whatever, just throwing up kind of, in this case, it was a reddish orange color. And you can see how the reddish just sort of made the green a little more natural feeling, starting to push it towards the brown a little bit. Um, and still a lot of opacity and all that kind of thing. So this would have been the first, like technically the first glaze I used after the grisaille portion, both open and closed. Open being the transparent portion and the closed grisaille being when I use opaque paint, in this case, just the white. And then from there, it would have been more color glazes. So you could see how there's some warms and cools showing up for sure. You could see how this does not feel like a paint stroke of color. This has a little bit more of an old like Van Dyke feeling or something where it's almost like staining furniture a little bit more than color matching. So we get some forced blues in here because of all the warmth. We get a lot of like prismatic color. And this was probably one of the first or second glazes. And you can see how the nose is starting to get created, but it almost feels transparent like skin is. Like there's an interesting effect working indirectly like that. Because I don't know, everything feels a little more fleshy in my opinion, rather than just because sometimes paint applied. I don't know. Do you guys hear that?
Yeah, one second. Let me investigate.
I
Sorry.
thought it might be a question. I don't know. So yeah, so then just building up, same process we'll use in Sicily. Um, and let's move on to maybe this is yeah, so starting to look pretty natural after this. But if you look, you could still see some of those same shapes, really a lot of that green still popping through. It's just really kind of a gentle process of just staining over and over again on top of the grisaille that I had created. Um, you can look at the chin, that's still about the same level of transparency it always was, really working to preserve that. I really like these greens popping through. They almost feel neon green when in a way, but before that, terre verte's not the brightest green in the world, but in relation to now these kind of glazed colors on top, it has a real vibrancy. Um, oh, this was fun. This was the little color study I did. So this would be a direct approach to that. Little poster studies, little color studies. This is probably only like 3 or 4 inches across, but I think they're very helpful to know what color I kind of want to get, and it's a little easier to do that directly. And so you can see these are all colors. I'm not glazing anything on this, and it's pretty thick and has that feeling. Um, then this might be done. No, I think this is getting pretty close to being done on this one, but I think there's a few after. Maybe that's finished. So we get some real thick paint there, the thinness around. Um, and is this the last? So that's the finished painting there. So with this process, we could go from, something very, I mean, in a way it looks crude, but I'm really trying my best to get good placement so I can build on top of it. So it's like taking that whole process that we try to do, one afternoon painting directly with the drawing and the color matching and all that, and just kind of breaking it down into more and more smaller parts. So, eating an elephant one bite at a time or whatever. Like I always think about it in relation to this. There's so many confusing parts about painting, so many value, color, gesture, proportion, drawing, temperature, all these like insanely complicated things. Reminds me of like if I was to rebuild a car engine or something. If my engine was bad, I probably wouldn't just start pulling parts off and hoping, that I could put them all back in the right way, you know, get them all out on the garage floor, unscrewed everything, and be totally lost at that point. So this is a little more like you're taking one part off at a time, examining it for what it is and putting it back in the engine, maybe like looking at the carburetor and figuring out how that works and knowing how that goes and then working that out. Same with this. It's just taking something really complicated and breaking it down into small sections that are manageable, from like drawing to tone to a little bit of beginning color, and then ultimately ending with something that looks, you know, pretty substantial, but didn't stress anyone out too much with all that confusion. It's just one bite at a time. Um, the 11 on the door was because that was March 11th when New York shut down for COVID. So I made a little nod to that on the 11 on the door. And I remember everything was closed, and it was even really hard to find a straw, like to get a straw for her to use because I didn't bring one. But ultimately, that was a really fun day. We got to go around and everything was empty. And we just sort of like had fun, had a blast for an afternoon, me and Betty, and then made that painting. So, and then this applies to all the work I do. So these were paintings in a show recently at Arcadia. So that's the finished painting. Is that the finished one? I don't know if that has all the details. That's definitely it finished. But it's still the same exact process. I started here. This is an acrylic paint, so you could see how kind of chalky I allow it to get. I'll just sort of like spread white all over everything. These are little paint pens. I'll reestablish things with paint pens. I don't know. Working in acrylics really fun because it feels like you're dealing with paint and all sorts of different tools, like as simple and kind of goofy as it sounds, it's really fun to just pull out a box of markers and start marking on your painting. So I kind of get led by that stuff. And then this is probably about the end of the grisaille on the face, and you can see the little graphite drawings here and there poking through and reestablishing lines with the markers. And then kind of half and half. So that's me working my way down the face. So the difference in this one, in the one I just showed, is I took it to a little bit more of a quicker, direct approach in the skin. So where all the skin was, I just kind of did a little bit more color matching a little bit thicker and just kind of worked my way down rather than a series of layer after layer to get the color. So this kind of bridged the gap in between direct and indirect. And then ultimately, well, that's a few steps behind. I don't
Um,
know if I
so I
have
have
a
a question.
yes.
So if you go back to that kind of like half and half, like where you start to introduce color,
Yeah,
um, are you introducing oil now, or are
that's
you,
oil.
okay, so now like you have that underpainting, the grisaille underpainting is acrylic, and then you add the oil on top. Got it.
Yeah, and this was a I don't usually do it this way, working my way down as like a little bit more of a direct oil layer on top of it. But I was really interested in seeing how close I could get it in a pass or whatever, just towards refinement. So it was really fun. I'll probably end up doing that a little bit more too. Um, and these are some other ones from that series. So kind of the same thing. This was all from a series I did. This was one of my friends in New Orleans and went to New Orleans to photo her and another actually one of her friends. I didn't know him well. I didn't know him at all, but I wanted to kind of mimic a the cycle of a relationship. So what we did was I just had them kind of act out a story, sort of like getting together in the middle, things starting to go wrong, and then sort of ultimately a breakup at the end. And so I have a bunch of like images from it that actually turned out really, really neat. And these are some like kind of date night images of them too. So it sort of looks like they're in a bar or something. They were actually sitting on the floor, and that was her coffee table. You can see like in here the little fleur de lis because we were in New Orleans. I thought that was fun that they had that on the cup. But yeah, they were great. They were such fun. Like I think they had both done. I know she does some acting. I think he did a little bit too. So they kind of got into the whole thing. And for this painting was entirely acrylic. I didn't use any oil on this at all. And the acrylic, there are these like kind of fluorescent paints that you could use, fluorescent reds and pinks and oranges, and they really like made it glow. I had always intended to do an oil layer on top of it because I like oftentimes it's useful to get the softness of oil, how it blends out transitions and kind of makes everything a little softer. But somehow this one just kind of worked and I didn't really go back into touching it. But yeah, I like the that kind of red lens. I've seen a lot of it in movies. Like if you look at like a lot of David Lynch's movies and stuff, there's always under a red light. And I was just kind of inspired by that. And actually more than anything, that old Ray Price country album, what is it? It ain't no good life, but it's my life. The nightlife ain't no good life, but it's my life. There was the cover of that album is very similar to this, and I was always kind of struck by that album, even though it's some sort of like goofy kind of 70s photography. But so yeah, that in this one's totally acrylic, and this one was a lot of acrylic, and then I probably most all the visible paint has been an oil layer on top of this. But you could see the same kind of indirect techniques going on. Although there's a little glare here, you could definitely see it in these shadows. They're very transparent, just like kind of like I was doing with the Betty and all these shadows here, just keeping them really kind of transparent and mysterious, and then a little bit more build up on the paint and the fabric and stuff like that. Um, and oh yeah, this one was cool too. Um, that's the two of them again, sort of like I don't know, streetcar named Desire or something kind of feel to it. Like he's just looking out the window and she's kind of checked out, just looking straight ahead. This was one of the early layers. I kind of like that roughness, sort of like the openness of it. But actually the gallery wanted me to finish it, so finish it up the painting.
Hey,
So
Marshall.
that's yeah.
Hey, sorry to interrupt. In the chat, we have a question that says, "Can you leave the surface part acrylic and part oil? Do you do that often?"
Yeah. Oh yeah. A lot. Um I think it's weird. It's like I can't really tell the difference in a lot of the places on the painting. Um unless like I know that I did like the underpainting only in acrylic and then start color over it or something. But yeah, generally I don't really know which is which. It's like they all just kind of blend seamlessly, which I like. I mean, it's kind of cool. There's huge benefits to working in acrylic, you know. Number one, like you're not dealing with the solvents and all that stuff in the studio. I love it that you could just like leave your brushes in like the water all day and not have to worry about washing everything. The paint's so cool. Like made so many like interesting kind of improvements in acrylic. Like there's all these mediums that will really extend the drying time or really shorten them. So, I mean, I'm a big fan of oil painting. That's how I always learned how to paint and kind of for the last 20 or whatever years painted in oil. But once I started using acrylic, it works so well with that. Like in the beginning layers, you want it to dry really fast. And especially if you're layering up a painting, you want it to dry fast. And like I started getting really frustrated with the layering times in oil. Like sometimes I'd have to wait like a week before I could do another layer. And with acrylic, it's like 5 minutes, you know, it's so great because you can really get a lot of nice effects. And there's a roughness to it. There's like a hard edge kind of roughness to the acrylic that is nice. Like you could get some lines and some details that are harder in oil. But then what oil's great at is a lot of transparency, really beautiful like luminosity and softer transitions, longer times to blend and all that. So it just sort of like naturally works well to finish them off with oil. But to that question, if I don't really, except one concern is the archivalness. Like I don't really want to paint oil back over or acrylic back over the oil. There's something a little archivally unstable about that. So I try to keep track of what's what, just so I don't like, so the paint doesn't fall off from, you know, the next layer if I didn't layer it up right. But yeah, generally that's my only consideration. Um, so I'll show you guys something that I'm not showing anyone.
Sorry, one more question, Marshall.
Yeah.
Can acrylic be used to glaze like oils? Maybe we'll get into that during the workshop.
Yeah, definitely in the workshop, and absolutely it can. It's a great glazer. And that's one of the reasons I also switched, me being frustrated with drying times, but also in the classroom being frustrated because sometimes you only have like, you know, a couple of poses to try to teach people how to paint indirectly. Like at the New York Academy, I teach an indirect painting class. And it's just not enough time to really learn how to glaze in a few weeks of oil. Because, like I said, it's one layer a day, you know. So if you have a pose that's 3 days, you get three, maybe three glazes if you're lucky. Well, probably not even this, you know, is takes much longer than a day usually for students. So that's like, you know, that cuts into your time, and then you're really not left with a lot of time to glaze something up, you know, to this level or something. So I realized that, like, boy, if we play around with acrylic in the classroom, if students are up for it, which some, you know, get a resistance till they all learn that they love it. But it takes, so it's like you could do infinite amount of glazes in a day with acrylic. It's such a neat way to do it. Actually, someone who teaches at the academy, Peter Drake, he is a big acrylic user, and with a lot of his stuff is used with glazing. So look up his work. There's just a real richness and a vibrancy to his paintings. And yeah, all done with acrylic glazes. So um oh, so this is something I'm showing you guys for this process in this webinar, but these are all in my studio, these paintings. So, don't share them with anyone or anything. There's so what I'm working on currently. And I wanted to show you to talk about how I am using these glazes. So this idea is a series, and I think Annie mentioned I was on a residency over the fall and just kind of thinking about the world and my feelings about it politically and just where it feels like we're headed with things like AI and regulation and failing infrastructures and just sort of a cruelness that's settling in, kind of a hardness, kind of a sort of a maybe a little bit of a brutal kind of view on money and who has it and who doesn't have it, and maybe the people who have it have more rights and all that kind of thing, and just sort of like thinking about all that. And it got me thinking about there was a train crash in Ohio, in East Palestine, Ohio, that was one of these things where it's awful and tragic and looks like there was a lot of like just sort of like corporate greed and things. And the town, obviously, it's awful, these toxic chemicals, and they blew them up in a strange way that made this horrific, toxic cloud. And really bad to be in that situation, of course, as a resident, and you can't move because you're locked in, and now it's just so many little tragedies and something like that. And I was thinking about all that stuff on the residency. And the thing was, like, some of the images looking at them were very abstract and kind of compelling. I liked the way that they look so raw and they really encompass my feelings around that. But I didn't want to paint images from news stories. It felt like, well, maybe I could make a take on this that would satisfy me creatively and also get some of my thoughts out there. So I've always had this love of abstract expressionist paintings, probably more so than representational paintings, although I'm a representational painter. So I don't know when the idea came to me, but it felt like a good idea to maybe, as I'm trying this brand new way to design these images that I wasn't really quite sure what I was looking for. So I gave myself a parameter and thought about I'll design them in the shape of some abstract expressionist paintings that I like. So this is a Clifford Still painting here. And I think Clifford Still is fantastic. Like, um, his just seemed to make sense for what I'm doing, the sharpness, the hardness. It felt like um, he was kind of saying a lot of the things that I was feeling in these paintings anyway. So I took what he was doing and kind of put them into a train wreck, like having just sort of like train parts, very improbable space, it doesn't feel like this would ever be anything you'd come upon and see in reality. Maybe it's the idea of something, maybe it's the idea of things being destroyed or winding down or whatever, maybe a better time in the past or something, and now we're dealing with where we are now, type thing. So I just kind of used those shapes and let's see if I could get them both up at the same time. Let's see. Yeah, that should be both of them. Um, Can you see them both actually? Oops.
No, I can't see them both.
Yeah, I think the zoom window goes down. I remember this from T. Now you can see one, right? I don't know if I'll be able to get them side by side. But so yeah, maybe I'll try one more time. It'd be cool if I could. Let's say this one and maybe this one. Okay. So yeah, just really keying off those shapes and colors and trying to fill it in with my own. Um, some of these were photos that I actually took. Some of them were Google Images. Some were things designed off of 3D modeling program, Blender. This little pig here. This guy's name is Rudy. He's in a bar in Hell's Kitchen, actually close to the studio. And I made him on Blender, and so that's a 3D program where I can kind of move him around and use the light. And I just had him kind of in that crash there.
Marshall, I don't think we see what you're referring to.
Oh, maybe which one do you see? Do you see any of them?
No, well, I see just the folder. Yeah, now I see
Okay.
the
So
painting.
that's Rudy right there.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, he was done with 3D software, kind of a sculpting program. You get to sculpt and paint the things, and then you have them as little assets that you can use. Um, so that's one. And
Marshall, that one in particular feels very Japanese to me, like one of those old Japanese prints.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
oh
like a Hiroshige kind of is that something you have in mind, that style of
I say the main reference was not Japanese. It's this German painter, Caspar David Friedrich. Do you guys
Mm,
know
mhm.
him? He
The kind of savage icy
the
icicle.
ice.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I was thinking about that, and I had tried to do it in the pattern of that ice,
Mm,
but
hmm
ultimately I kind of like the Clifford still. That's just so. I think using these shapes is so unusual, like white in both of these corners, a big rip of white down the middle, just like I found them more successful if I was doing abstract expressionist and trying to bring realism to those rather than referencing a realistic painting because the moves that an abstract expressionist is doing is so unconventional
hmm
in terms of some sort of optical realism or even perspective or any of these little tools that I studied and learned and all that, they're kind of all out the window and I'm just trying to make it fit. And I thought that ultimately the images to me were much more satisfying in that way.
hmm
Um,
Marshall, I have a question just based on that, and it's about narrative. I'm interested in how you approach narrative because some of these paintings are frankly narrative, like the series with the two actors you went down to New Orleans for. And then just Museum, your most narrative, you abandon it completely, and you become it disappears. And I wonder, it's a very interesting game, and I wonder, do you think about that? Is that intentional?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm so happy you asked that. That's awesome. Yeah, I think about narrative all the time. My class at the Art Students League it's a narrative painting class. And I try to get the students to think about, well, in a very David Lynch way, like the narrative, like in a song, whatever you're listening to, like whatever it's the Beatles or Love Me Do or whatever, like it's all in the music and the tone. It's the feelings that you get. You don't really have to listen intently to lyrics to know what someone's saying. Or better stated, I was watching a comedian. It was French actually. and I don't speak French, and just I knew where to laugh, and I was enjoying it just as much as we were speaking English because it's like we sort of have this. In a way, I think the words get in the way. It's sort of like it's the expression, it's the pacing, it's the rhythm that the comedian's doing, and you sort of know exactly where to laugh. It's all paced the same way. And it's just as fun one way or the other, or a song. Like I enjoy song just as much, and I don't need the lyric sheet right next to me. And like the earlier series that I was showing is was very narrative in that I was having them act out things. But what I try to enforce to my students is it's the shapes and it's the color. That's the narrative. Like maybe Freud would talk about it in terms of like latent content and manifest content. You know, you're looking at a dream, sure, two people went to a cafe and there were red lights. That's sort of like the story, but it's all what's underneath that that's the interesting stuff. And I tried to kind of strip these away more and more of the manifest stuff and just be all kind of that latent sort of like this is sharp, this is hard, this is metal, this is heavy, this is those are the feelings that I feel like are more successful than, you know, if someone was here in this rubble doing a sad face or something. You know, like it's like I don't know if it needs that. It needs just that all those elements that are very concrete and I feel like in a way I'm hoping, I feel like in the art that I consume, I feel like it's a more direct way to someone's feelings, you know, than such a linear story. Does that answer your question, Carlo?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
And there's
I'm fascinated by that idea of latent and manifest content in a painting.
me too. Yeah, I think there's like all these little shapes, these semiotic shapes, these voids that we fill with our own content, you know, like in our history, so many people have done the same pose. Like it's just someone's take on Salvador Mundi or whatever, and they all have a little bit different feelings and they all have similar feelings. It's just, I get fascinated by it too, teaching it, like how much of a feeling can you get with just shape and color? Like this, for instance, this next one is funny. It was from a Philip Guston, you know, and Philip Guston has some very humorous aspects and some heavy aspects, and they are tied away the way that he's painting and all that. It feels a little primitive, a little simple, a little and tied in with that, there's a little more room for humor and all. And so I'm doing his in that sort of way, seeing what that would feel like, just that kind of rubble heap. And this one's very early in the process. This has a long way to go before it's fully a painting, but it's been fun, like seeing if there's something a little bit funnier or whatever that I could put in there. And this one's very heavy. This was from a Franz Klein. That might be the most sort of intense one so far. This gray here was a whole train that I just painted out like a couple of days ago, but just like a real improbable kind of smoke path and like little fires and stuff, almost like little campfires and just all that kind of wreckage. This one looked a little more like what a news story photo would look like, but all these unusual things about just the way that the smoke is moving and everything. And this one's really early on too, that all these are about, I don't know, 40%, something like that. Like they have a long way to, and this is like, I'm always changing my mind too, like painting things out and painting new things in, which takes a lot of time as well. This painting's about 8 feet across, so it's pretty large.
Mm.
Mark,
Um,
I have a question. When
yes.
you say early on, are you applying, like, are you starting with acrylic here? And then what do you do when you change your mind and you've started with oil and you don't want to deal with drying time? Like, how do you know when to kind of like jump in with oil at a certain point?
I think it's when there was a moment on this one that I knew I had to jump into oil because it's not very clear, like in this photo here, but all this like cracked glass, this was from a Google Images train. But I was like having a blast painting it with acrylic and it had that real sharpness and I was really enjoying it. And then I stepped back and it's like, oh my God, like all of a sudden that's the only thing that really looks detailed. And all of a sudden the rest of the painting looked really, really bad. So I knew that it needed a little bit of softness. So I went in through here and painted with oil just to kind of justify all the hard detail I did up front. And a little bit back here too, that's a very smoky kind of area. So it needed the things that I couldn't really do with acrylic. But this is 100% acrylic. There's no oil in this yet. Same with this one. And then this one down here, this is the Robert Motherwell image, the abstract expressionist image. And here's the painting off of it. And this blue tape here, that's just me remembering what's oil and what's not. All this in here has been in oil and the rest is acrylic. So I can if it's the difference between a section here or here, I can't tell the difference. So I needed that tape so I don't go back acrylic over the oil. But in here where we're getting some kind of more like detailed clouds and stuff, that's that's a little bit more feasible with oil over acrylic to get a more softness to those clouds. So that would have been the need there. So I guess sometimes it's like I'll say, okay, I'm going to do a figure painting and I'll only the underpainting will be acrylic and then I'll naturally know when to shift because I've already kind of made that decision. But on these, it just feels like when I need the softness or the slow drying times or maybe a little luminosity of oil, I'll shift and then because I'll use acrylic as long as I can. I'll take them as far as I can in acrylic because it's to me it's a little funner to paint in acrylic. It's definitely a simpler setup. The drying times with all the glazes is really advantageous. So usually I'll hold off until I have to switch. So, but that's it. Um, any questions?
Yeah, does anyone have any questions in the audience?
I have a question, and this might be a silly question because I don't paint. But do you feel different mentally when you switch media from say from oil to acrylic? Is there are you do you feel like you're shifting gears mentally when you do that, or is it seamless?
Yeah, it is a bit of a shift. Like, I don't know if I could quite explain it, but like sometimes what if I painted for like a week in one or the other, and then I shift, I'm always like weirdly excited. I'm always like, oh man, I forgot how much I love this one. You know, you find all these like, and it could be either one. Like they both, there's something like the ease of oil and like the spreadability of it is always exciting to get into when I shift. And then going back to acrylic, the way you could glaze and layer it up so effortlessly is always really exciting. So I don't know if it's as much of a mental shift as a technical, but I am always surprised at how much I enjoy painting with one or the other, you know. I've been trying to introduce drawing a little bit more as well. Sometimes it's hard to know where to insert it. There's one of those train images that I'm doing that is all just drawing so far. Like I took the drawing part really far and sort of like it there, and I'm wondering how I can join color into the line and stuff. And that would definitely be more of a mental shift. So, Oh, and here, I guess we could finish on this. This is at that painting is at the window for anyone if you're in New York at the Art Students League right now on 57th Street. You could go by and see it from the street. It's on the one of the windows from the school. So that's it in there.
All of our New Yorkers definitely stop by. Marshall, we have a couple of questions in the chat, so I'm just going to go in order. Um,
Okay.
so first question is, first Julie said, amazing work. And when you glaze in oil, what are you using when you're glazing?
I basically just use well, you know what? I won't say that. I use linseed oil primarily, but there's also this it comes in a tube from Rublev and it's called Velasquez medium. It's like an oleogel, which is like a almost like a linseed paste, but they put marble dust and stuff in it. It kind of thickens the paint up and extends it. And I love that, but I would say 90% just linseed oil. Maybe put a little solvent in the linseed oil, but pretty much linseed, which is great medium. It's really slow drying times, which is nice too for those last layers.
That other medium with the marble dust sounds fun though. Um,
It's great. It's
yeah.
cool.
Uh, okay, our next question is, what acrylic brand do you like? I was wondering that too. Like, do you have a preferred acrylic that you work with?
I do. I look like I'm it's all golden. So it's like I don't know. I don't know why that brand feels very comfortable to me. It's like it just feels like the one that everybody uses it. I've had no problems with it. So pretty much all golden. And there are some really interesting products with golden. If you use their open medium, golden's open acrylic medium, the drying times will be super slow, which is great. Or you could use like a high flow medium that they make, which is much quicker drying times. And there's also this product called self-leveling gel. And that in between layers, it almost acts as if you, because it's a thick gel, totally clear. And if you imagine like painting a painting on a piece of plexiglass or something, and then putting another layer of plexiglass over it and continuing the painting, and then another layer of plexiglass and continuing the painting. You'd start to get some interesting kind of depth in that, sort of like seeing through the layers. And that leveling gel starts to give a little bit of that effect, which I've really liked. And that's another golden product. So there are like advantages outside of oil, I can't imagine a product in oil that would give you that sort of like layer sealed off in amber to work on and then another one. It's like it's really cool. So that yeah, if you find yourself at the league or whatever, walk by that painting because there is kind of an interesting depth I feel like that it got through those layers. Which in these photos with my like old iPhone, they look pretty pixelated. You can't get in and really see the painting, unfortunately.
Yeah, every time I'm in the aisle, like at Blick or something, and I get to the golden mediums, I'm like a kid in a candy store. Like there's just so much to play with.
They're amazing.
Um,
What
that
what mediums do you use?
Oh my God, I've done like the glass bead gel, the there's a medium that's like it almost is it makes your paint look like concrete almost. I forget the exact name, but I can send that to you at another time.
In glass bead gel, I'd be interested in that. I've never used
Oh,
that.
really fun. All right, we'll trade
Oh,
notes after this.
yeah, definitely.
Okay. Uh, Next question is about Sicily. So, Sicily offers a plethora of inspiration in landscape and classical antiquities. Do you anticipate that those surrounding influences will influence the work done in the studio and with the model? What do you think about that?
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, what a place to draw inspiration from. And I think anytime you're outside of your regular life, your regular experience, I'm always shocked at how much creativity opens up. And you can't imagine a more inspiring space than Sicily, and Italy in general, just where so much of this Western art came from, It's like such an inspiring place for sure. It'll definitely have an impact.
Awesome. Thank you. Um, okay. Julie says, uh, this is an art related question, trust me. Coffee or tea, pie or cake, ocean or mountain?
Okay. Tea? What was it? What was it? Pie or cake?
Wait, wait, oh, I'll go one at a time. Coffee or tea,
Tea,
pie or cake,
pie,
ocean or mountain?
mountain.
Okay, interesting. Julie, I'm interested in what that means about
It's a
Marshall.
good thing Marsala has both,
Yeah.
Yeah, we could do it all.
just in case. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Uh, Julie, again, different Julie. How limited is your palette for skin tones? Are there any special premix colors that you use?
Okay, this is a massive topic. I love color, so I don't, unless I'm doing an experiment, like a fun thing. Okay, one of these is a very limited palette. If we go up here to her skin tone, this entire painting was only painted. It hardly even looks like it right now. I can't believe it, but it was raw umber, ivory black. Um, what is it called? It's some sort of like a pale magenta. Gamblin would call it like a radiant magenta, just one of those like quinacridones mixed with white in the tube. Cadmium orange and alizarin crimson. So that was five pretty pretty strange colors to use. And basically, you got your raw umber as sort of a warm, you've got a warm cool, and then you've got your ivory black as kind of a blue. And then you've got the yellow ochre, alizarin crimson, cad orange to do sort of complementing those, an orange, blue, kind of green, red type ways. So that's extremely limited, but that's just because it's fun. Like, I don't know if I would a day in and day out, I'm not usually doing anything like that. Um, I do love I play around with a lot of palettes. Annie, were we doing that when you were you didn't take a painting class, did you? No, it was
Your
drawing.
drawing class. Yeah.
This was an old Peter Cox palette. Peter Cox being a great league instructor, passed away a few years ago. Awesome painter, and he would do raw sienna, Chevenix's purple brown from Old Holland, and ivory black. Great palette. And I played around with that a ton. So I'll limit them for fun, but generally when I'm painting in the studio, like for any of these other ones, like even this, I wouldn't have counted colors or this. I wasn't that interested in how many are or not. I use it. I have after years and years of painting, I have so many different colors that I'll just kind of squeeze them out at random, sort of like what I feel like the day will require. And I do like that way of painting, just sort of getting in and reacting to what's in front of you and maybe trying a few, maybe not, maybe it's just it feels a little more intuitive. So unless I'm having fun and saying, you know what, I want to try something limited and strange on this painting, I generally won't.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Um, I have a question actually. So this is kind of related to the Sicily question that we were talking about before, like how Sicily will influence our workshop and how what we'll be learning with you in May. What is the like why go to a workshop? Why go abroad? Why go away to make art? And maybe, I mean, you just came back from residency, so maybe you can speak to that journey to create and get away from your day-to-day life.
Yeah, I mean, the advantages are huge. Like, I think, like, I had a little bit, I mentioned it before, like, I'm shocked at how much of a creative motor we all have and how much the day to day takes from that, like whatever it is. I don't know if you guys are like me, but if I have to make a phone call in the afternoon, it feels like my painting day is shot. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's so hard. Like and the phone's always like going off and these things to tend to and oh, I gotta go to
Right.
the store. I gotta do this. And like getting away from that is key. You like when I was on the residency, very similar to this trip to Italy, it's like your mind is a little clear and you just really make breakthroughs you wouldn't have made before. You'll change the way that you work, you'll in in Sicily, it'll be nice because there will be so much history and influences that will seep in anytime you travel, you get those kind of perspectives from being somewhere with such a rich history. But just getting away in general is so essential. Like it's very different from taking a workshop in your hometown where you're driving there and you're, going to the store on the way home and all that kind of thing. It's just sort of all distracted. And when you dedicate a little bit of time in a moment to focus on something, in this case, focus on your creativity and yourself, I'm always shocked at how creative I am in those times and how it's all just all waiting there. And it's just like I've always found like the life of an artist to be that to be one of the more complicated things because you need that time and it's very hard to get. And sometimes when you go away, you can find it for a little while. It's really hard to get actually, it's like and then in when you're away is brand new ways of seeing things and relating to your work and all that. So I think they're essential.
Yeah, it definitely gets you out of your these like kind of ruts that you get in, like these ways of thinking, and it just creates new opportunities to see the world differently. I completely agree.
Totally.
Yeah. And especially in Sicily with such a rich layered history. It's really incredible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. So if anyone else has a question, please drop it in the chat. Um, Other than that, yeah, we might wrap up in a minute. So I'll take last call on questions. And Marshall, if you have any, closing thoughts, or I don't know if you do, not to put you on the spot.
No, thanks for coming, everybody. This is great. Yeah, thanks for letting me ramble on for an hour.
Fun. It's really cool to see the new work too and see how you're using these techniques in your own practice. It's so generous to share this with us, especially work in progress.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm excited to show it. Yeah, I'm glad you guys were up for it. So,
No, for sure. Um, okay, so I mean, yeah, thank you everyone. I'm going to drop Marshall's workshop link in the chat. Hint, hint, click that, sign up. I definitely encourage that. I'm also going to drop my email in the chat. So you can reach me at Annie at yeah, Annie at artistretreats.com. Second. Can't do two things at once. Awesome. And please reach out if you have any questions, if you're interested in signing up, but just want a little more clarification. I got you. We can set up a little video meeting. And I'd love to hear from you. We'll share this probably within the next day or so. Yeah, and thanks so much for joining. And I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation with Marshall in Sicily.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thanks. All right. Have a good night, everyone. Thank
Good
you.
night.
Just keeping it open so if people are trying to get the chat link.